From New York, it's That Kevin Show.
See, I knew it.
Come on, Kev. What's a few classified documents between friends?
I told you all the time. I knew it. I knew he had some too.
Here he is, That Kevin McCullough.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest, I am so pleased to have with us. The first time I ever had any interaction with her, I was actually on her television show on a thing called Bold TV a number of years ago here in the city. And over the last several years, I've really, truly enjoyed watching her take on issues, become an even more articulate spokesperson for things that she believes in. And now as a representative of the Independent Women's Forum, doing great work here and across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Carrie Sheffield.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. So great to see you. And yeah, I know we've worked together for a long time, so I'm happy to be on your show now.
Some of the viewers on the Salem News Channel might even recognize that you were in the chair of one Sebastian Gorka not long ago as well.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. He can't just say a word. He's got to make the pronunciation last as long. I think it's the Brit in him, right? Because they just like to hear the language. Anyway, Seb's a good guy. We're grateful to have him around the Salem ranks.
Big fan.
You work with the Independent Women's Forum, and in this day and age in which I believe most of the Women of the Year awards went to men, how does that sit with you?
Well, I got to tell you, we are so proud of Riley Gaines. She's one of our spokeswomen. And if your viewers don't know what happened to her a couple weeks ago, she was assaulted out at San Francisco State University, I believe. And she was giving remarks out there defending women's sports because she'd been a Division I athlete and had to compete against Leah Thomas, a biological male who had swam for, I believe, 3 years on the men's swim team at UPenn, and then senior year flips and swims for the women's team and shatters all the records, and just fundamentally unfair. And the fact that she was mobbed and she had to be barricaded, the police barricaded her for about 3 hours. She missed her flight. It just, Kevin, how did we get here? I just don't understand. Like, how are we even having these conversations? Like, what has happened to Western civilization?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Riley, because we did talk about it the weekend that occurred. And it's always a good look for your movement to have your activists, who are men dressed as women, storm the stage and punch a woman in the face. Anytime you have men punching women, that's just a great PR move for the overall look of the movement, right? I mean, this is what you're wanting to get across, that we're back to the pre-Title IX days where the men are beating women and they don't have anything to say about it.
Well, what they say about it is you're a bigot if you're not okay with that.
Oh, yes, I forgot that part. Very key that we get that part. We're bigots because we don't want men to punch women.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they would say, well, they don't condone violence, but a small sliver does. But I think overall we're actually going in the right direction. So just last week we had the U.S. House pass a bill that said, protecting women's sports, basically, and that's great. And we're seeing it happen at the state level. So we have a piece of legislation at Independent Women's Voice, our sister C4,
right,
called the Women's Bill of Rights, and it defines, shocker, what a woman is. Even though I don't think any
one of the most elusive answers to questions that people testifying in Congress can't come up with. Have you noticed this? There's been so many hearings in the last 2 years. It started with a Supreme Court justice where somebody just asked a simple question: how do you define what a woman is? And they can't answer the question.
Well, yes. And it's amazing how this collective amnesia has just fallen on a generation of progressives to not know the most basic questions, but yet they can tell us how to run our lives in every aspect without being able to define what a woman is. But anyway, we have, like I said, a bill that does define what a woman is, and notes that because under the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and sometimes when we say it's the Women's Bill of Rights, they're like, oh, are you trying to create new rights? And it's like, no, actually, it's just It's outlining how in the current, just the way the Constitution is, the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution has been interpreted to say, because women are different from men, in order to apply and enforce the Equal Protection Clause, things have to be run differently for women than they are run for men. That's it. In order to satisfy the law, women are treated differently than men. Shocking.
I am stunned, Carrie, that the national women's movements, the traditional National Organization for Women, and all the federation and everything else that have always been touting choice and women's rights and everything, have gone literally deaf and dumb on this issue. And you would think that this was a bigger deal than Title IX. You would think this was a bigger deal than the 1960s and 70s women's movement. This is actually, I feel like, kind of on the par with the 1920s feminists, of which I am a proud believer in. I'm not so much with the 60s and 70s group, but the 1920s, it was all about fundamental human dignity and rights. And this seems to be quickly eroding, to the degree that the president said that if he was to sign that bill that the House passed last week, that it would in some way indicate that that we were going to be on the wrong side of history. And you wrote a piece recently. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to get into it. But you say that this erosion of a lot of things that have made us distinctively American in the past is having an enormously negative impact on the culture today. But as to this issue, where are the women's rights organizations?
Well, I'm happy to say there are some leftist women's groups that are engaging on this. For example, the Women's Liberation Front, also known as WOLF, we worked quite a bit with them. We held a rally with them last year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Our legal center director just wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal with someone from WOLF. So there are some, and we had some other, Kara Dansky is very outspoken liberal feminist. We worked with her also. So there are some, and we definitely want to help cultivate their voices and work with them. But you're right, by and large, this has been a complete abdication of standing for the most basic fundamental women's rights. And it's interesting, I was on a PBS program called To the Contrary recently. It's a women's show. Mm-hmm. And they had the wife of a former congressman from Missouri, Congressman Carnahan, his wife, Deborah, was on. And she said, and she's an older generation too, which she of all people, I feel like should know, because she was part of that group that fought the second, with the second wave. But she said, this only affects a tiny sliver of people. We're not talking about that many people who are affected by this. And I'm just like, oh, sister,
where have you been?
No,
yeah, it's exploding.
It's not just sports too. It's women's prisons, it's women's shelters, any place where women, again, under the Constitution for the Equal Protection Clause, where we need physical safety. You saw that with a case with the sorority where a biological male joined, and I don't know if I can say this on your show, but he was peeping on these sorority sisters in the sorority house. They was, forced to accept him, biological male, who he got an erection from staring at these girls.
And it's odd that they said they didn't feel safe. She's Carrie Sheffield. I'm Kevin McCullough. It's That Kevin Show, and we're coming right back.
Ready or not, he'll be right back. That